John here, wanting now to talk about some youthful sailing experiences that I've had. I actually was born in the U.S. and I moved up to Canada, to Montreal when I was, I guess, 8 or 9 years old. And where I lived was about 2 blocks from this Lake St. Louis, which is part of the St. Lawrence River, which is the biggest river coming into North America, basically, from a transportation point of view, and anyway, so Lake St. Louis was a sort of a bulge in the St. Lawrence River, and it was a great playground for us. In other words, I had my virtually your cottage right at your back door. I had a 2-block walk to get to the Baie D'Urfe Yacht Club, and so when I got there, I started doing what they call junior squadron sailing, and so I learned how to sail. What you do is you go out in these little flying junior boats, and they're 2 or 3 man boat, and single sail and single hull, and you go out and you learn, and you flip the boat over, and you learn to sail and all the different angles of sailing and things like that. And it was great. I learned a lot, and I really enjoyed sailing. As a matter of fact, I dreamed of sailing and dreamed of sailing offshore and all the rest. And back in those days, it was kind of neat. You're not using a motor, and you could actually get anywhere you wanted with your own ingenuity and some wind. So I got into the racing. What they did at this club, I think we had Wednesday night races, and then we had weekend Saturday, Sunday races, which were a lot of fun. And I was just a young guy. I was probably the age when I started really doing most of the racing. I would crew for other guys, older guys that had boats there, and I'd go down to the yacht club and volunteer to crew for whoever wanted to go out in the race. And so I'd get into a lot of races just as a crew. Which means the crew means you're handling the foresails of the jib as opposed to actually steering the boat. And so, when I was doing the junior squadron, I did the instructing. I learned how to sail a junior squadron, and then I moved up to being an actual instructor too. And so now in those races, I'd be actually doing the captaining and skipping on a flying junior boat, which is okay. But anyway, finally, and I'd always liked the idea of sailing. It was great. But one thing about monohull sailboats, dinghies and such, they don't go very fast. And it's so funny because when they have sailing races, and even to this day, I still do racing on single hull boats, and you're going, in a race, you're maybe going 5, 6, 7 miles an hour, depending on the wind. That's pretty slow. You can almost walk that fast, but you won't believe how intense that is when you're actually out on a race course, because you've got 20 or 30 boats that are all going 5 or 6 miles an hour, and they all want to go a quarter of a mile an hour faster. And so, the skippers get, it's intense. People go crazy. They're yelling at their crew and everything else. Anyway, it was, so to me, I thought, well, wouldn't it be better if you just go, instead of 5 or 6 knots and yell at each other, why not get a boat that goes 20 knots, and then you're going to be faster than everybody anyway. So we decided we're going to get a boat, and I convinced my father that we should get a catamaran. And back in those days, catamarans were kind of, nobody had a catamaran. But they were being used. As a matter of fact, they were pretty novel at the time, and I ended up convincing my dad that we should buy a C-class cat, which at the time, you may have or may not, if you're sailors, you might have heard of the America's Cup, and it's still ongoing, and big deal. Once every 3 or 4 years, I don't know how often they do it. They have the America's Cup, which is a bunch of international boats come in and compete, and the boats are supposed to be comparable, to each other. But they had back in those days what they called the Little America's Cup, and they were using C-class cats to actually compete in that race. And so it was a 25-foot catamaran, 2 hulls. And would go fast. It would go 20, 25 miles an hour. Matter of fact, we used to go out in Lake St. Louis, and we'd pull water skiers. And we were young, skinny kids. And, we'd get up and, have a guy behind on water skis, and away we'd go. And, that was kind of neat. But then when it came down to the Wednesday and the Saturday races, okay, so now I'm going to take this thing in a race. And I'm not the greatest skipper in the world. I was not bad on the crew side, but skippering means you got to know all the technicalities of not encroaching on other boats, and you know how to know the rules. It's the starboard rule. If you've been anywhere near a sailboat race when they're out in the middle of the course, one guy will be yelling starboard, and that means that they have the right of way over another boat that's coming at them, and the other boat's on the port tack. The port tack boat has to give way, and there's other things that are important in that regard as well. Downwind luffing and that kind of thing, and upwind luffing, and a bunch of different rules that I've never been great at. But so the nice thing about getting this catamaran, I never had to worry about most of those rules because we were always so far ahead of everybody. And the weirdest part, okay, so now we got this boat, we pull it into the Baie D'Urfe Yacht Club, which has all these traditional single-hulled old boats, like a snipe. Have you ever heard of a snipe? It's a single-hulled 16 or whatever foot boat and goes slow. But they're all out racing and great, and so now we are in the race, and there's not enough boats to have multiple classes, but so we races these boats. Well, within 2 minutes of the start, we're hundreds of yards ahead. Matter of fact, typically a sailboat race is a triangular course, and you go up and down and around, and you're getting all angles of the wind by doing the triangular course over that period of time. And so some boats perform better into the wind, some boats perform better off the wind and such, and so the triangular course tries to equate that. And anyway, but one thing about it, you normally need a crew, and so now I'm the skipper at 16 years old, or 15 or 14 even, as a matter of fact, and my mother, who would have been 30 years older than me, I guess, is going to be my crew, and she wasn't really a sailor, and but we would get out there and we would race, and we would be, again, we'd get, we'd always be cautious at the start, because that's a great way to get yourself into problems, because you're crashing into other boats all wanting to start at the same time. Anyway, we'd take off probably late in the start, which was good because we let the other guys get out of our way, so we didn't have to worry about causing any problems in that regard. But it wouldn't take more than a couple of seconds before we were way beyond them, and then we do our triangular course, whatever it was, twice, and we'd normally be back in the harbor, boat put away, and actually home before the other guys would even finish the race. But and they were all pretty much traditionalists, these guys, these sailors who I'd sailed with a lot because I'd been their crew for most of these guys, and they were looking at like, what is this boat you've got anyway? So, and it was fun, no question about it. It goes fast. And so the reason I started talking about this, I just did a video previously on a lady by the name of Pip Hare, who sails what they now call it's an Imoca 60, which is a boat that is single-handed solo around the world every 4 years, and they have a big race, and she's involved in that racing. And that boat goes those same speeds, but it goes a whole lot longer. In other words, they'll do that 20-25 knots, speed, all day long. And as a matter of fact, they now get around the world, if you can believe it, literally sailing from France back to France, going around the whole world in 75 days, which 2.5 months, pretty incredible. Anyway, just a fun story about, and my poor crazy mother, may she rest in peace, having to put up with me as her captain. But I must admit, she loved it because she couldn't believe how fast we were going, and she always also liked winning. She was very competitive. I mean, we never really won the race because one thing about sailing, it's always on handicap. So in other words, if your boat is faster, it's handicapped down to make it sort of equivalent to the speeds of the other boats. And as a matter of fact, we could finish, half an hour ahead of all the other boats would still lose the race, in which we did. From on a time corrected basis, we would usually come last. Actually, one of the funnest things, I finally got a very good sailor to go out with me, and he actually skippered the boat. Never had any experience on a cat, but he knew really well how to sail a race and how to win races, and we finally started winning some races, actually, even with the handicap included. Anyway, that's just a fun little story about my original sailing experiences. I went on to sail a lot. I still sail today. Now, as a matter of fact, I've got a little Prindle 16, which is again a catamaran boat, which is kind of fun to sail it. I can go out by myself, which is kind of nice. But meantime, I've had a 27-foot stiletto catamaran, which is also but that's big. You need some crew to go out on that, and we've done some racing in that boat back in the day. Not that long ago, with my daughter, who at the time was probably 15 or so years old herself, and sailing that boat at 20 knots or so, past all the monohull boats. But anyway, fun story about sailing. John here, thanks.